I received this comment on a video recently, and I thought it was pretty interesting just because I've never thought about fashion copyright in the context of designing outfits for fictional characters. So whether that's a concern for you, or if you're just like a fashion designer or fashion enthusiast in general, like I am, and you're curious about some of those nuances, let's talk fashion copyright. Now, we know what copyright is. It's legal protection over one's original work. And if you're a digital creator, it's what really safeguards your exclusive rights over your creations, whether that's reproduction of them, distribution of them. So obviously something very important that we are seeing increasing priority put around as it relates to content creation, especially on platforms like YouTube. But historically for fashion, it's been limited just because clothing is considered more of a functional item. And so like, what are you gonna copyright as it relates to like the function? It's not necessarily a novel or unique invention. It's something that we engage with every single day. But there was a landmark case, Supreme Court case, that came to ruling in 2016-2017 between Star Athletica and Varsity Brands, where Varsity Brands claimed that Star Athletica copied 5 of their cheerleader uniform designs and used them in their catalog. That really set the foundation for the Supreme Court to evaluate and deem that there could be specific design elements within clothing garments that could be considered or looked at with regard to separately from the actual function of clothing items, which is what sparked these 2-part separability test that has to define if something could be copyrightable or not. And that means that there needs to be an artistic feature that can be seen as distinct or separate from the clothing. It's something that provides creative, unique value to the clothing garment that the clothing garment like could function otherwise without, pretty much. And then the separated feature is a protected body of work. And so that obviously broadened the scope in which different things could be subject to copyright within the fashion industry, and really challenged people to be more unique and innovative and original with the different clothing collections, garments, fashions in general that they develop. So let's quickly go over what those copyrightable elements are. And none of these should really come as a surprise, like unique patterns and prints on fabric, something that might just have like a brand logo, which that's also a copyrightable element, or just something that is unlike a common pattern that you would typically see, to the point where it's so consistent that it's almost like a brand element within itself and is closely tied to a specific artist or a specific company or like developer. Think, for example, like Tetsuya Nomura, just talked about him for Kingdom Hearts, and people love to rant and rave about his incredible designs in Final Fantasy. Like, he has certain elements that he's added consistently across his character designs that you can kind of be like, oh, hey, that is a piece of his work. So translating that to the real world, like if someone has enough of those elements in place, you could argue that that's something that is copyrightable, which ties to things like original appliques, embroidery, decorative stitching, or just specific artwork illustrations and graphic designs. Like, what separates one t-shirt, one graphic tee from another tee? Obviously, the artistic work that was created and originated from someone's brain and passion and talents in order to enhance the quality and value of the clothing garment. Original design sketches, so think concept art, which really emphasizes the importance of documenting your creative process. I mean, obviously, even if it's not I'm thinking like Street Fighter 6, because they did such a great job with like a lot of their different concept art collections for various characters. Like, even if a lot of those didn't make it into the final game and everybody didn't see them, doesn't mean that they still didn't design some of those pieces, and that's not something that should be safeguarded and protected. And so essentially that just highlights that the work must be original, which is why there's so much concern around AI, more particularly if people are using it for commercial selling, that could run into an issue if there's just not enough vetting or enough kind of confirmation or regulation over just how unique that piece of work is. But that could apply to even humans biting off of other human styles. Now, what is non-copyrightable? This also, I don't think should come as a surprise. Basic garment shapes, silhouettes, and cuts, which is why I feel like if you're someone who is designing character outfits and you do come across a photo on Pinterest, or you just happen to develop a piece of clothing on a whim based on your human schema and what you've observed and documented in your brain in terms of different clothing garments, then like, should you really be as concerned unless you know very well that something is so unique that you've never seen it before that you might run into an issue. So just keep that in mind. Common patterns like polka dots, stripes, animal prints, like imagine if someone were to like copyright any of these, like that means no one could ever do it. That means fashion would cease to exist and it would be a monopoly, right? Like this should be a no-brainer. Letters, numbers, simple geometric shapes, colors within themselves. Some people might be able to trademark or copyright like color elements if it's been consistently done or signature, like Louboutin shoes, like the sole being red, but like a whole color, stop. Unless I don't know if it's like an original color that like someone genuinely created from scratch and says like, this is my color. That's a whole nother topic and video. And then titles, names, short phrases, and slogans. Like, I mean, is that really that creative unless it's done in some sort of like graphic or artistic way? But the words and like slogans and things within themselves, it's clever. And that might be some degree of intellectual property. Like maybe that's more trademark. Plagiarism's more so just like copying someone else's work and just not giving them the credit. Like, and we know that that's absolutely rampant within the digital sphere and a huge concern as far as digital art is concerned. It just really undermines the integrity of proper crediting of other people and showing respect to the work that they've done, which is why I can understand some of the stank and some of the ill that I've gotten with regard to doing like even my AI generated fashion outfit designs, even though pretty confident that the outputs are generic enough and just conceptual enough to not really be impeding upon anybody's unique copyrightable elements, because there's really not too much of what I just discussed as copyrightable elements that should be subject to that. But as far as like AI taking a whole bunch of different inputs from all these different sources and putting an output, that could lead to some potential concern. And I can kind of understand how. But again, unless that's like proven, that's also just a lot of speculation. And so that kind of does lead to like, what is an example of plagiarism that isn't like enforceable from a copyright perspective? Copying a unique combination of elements or an overall aesthetic, like, but that's usually if everybody's aware, like if there's some sort of like loose cultural consensus that is belonging to somebody and like, and like you clock that somebody did that. But if not, then it's just kind of like, is that really, it's a real big gray ambiguous area. But then copyright, like we know is like, that's a complete violation. Like we just know it took place. It's documented. It has there's evidence, like there's no getting around that. And I think what really fuels plagiarism is intent. Like a lot of bigger brands may be targeting independent designers and creatives and copying their work, not giving the credit, knowing very well that those elements aren't subject to copyright, and then trying to pass it off as their own without giving any sort of credit. Because there's many times where someone is just like out here ordering a whole bunch of products from like an independent designer and is just like, hey, love your work, so great. And then 6 months later, they produce some sort of like collection that looks nearly identical. And so I wanted to get into like, what is the likelihood of another designer kind of accidentally producing something similar to another designer, or a character designer illustrating or putting together an outfit for the character that happens to resemble what's in the real world very closely. The probability of that happening is very high, like just with the cyclical nature of trends and just with how many different clothing items and collections and fashions are produced on a regular basis. Like you're bound to run into that, which is kind of why I'm always like curious how some people can get so overly concerned about it, because it's just like, again, unless it's something so renowned that you know where it belongs to, it's like, even if someone actually bumps into that, like it's just the nature of the game. And designers are by default going to use a lot of similar colors, materials, silhouettes, and especially if they're reviewing trend forecasts and really keeping a pulse on what everybody else is doing and what the culture and the demand is interested in, like they're going to pull from those insights and from that knowledge and awareness to try to build up because it's a business, to try to really reinforce their chances of success and their ability to resonate with the marketplace. And so coincidental similarity is possible. You see many times, like whether it's common public figures or even if it's just video game to video game, like with designs looking very similar, like there's nothing new under the sun. There's only so much originality that can go around. you're bound to just run into something similar. So I just really want to emphasize that for those who might feel a little bit stifled from anxiety or concern that they might take the wrong step. It just really depends on like, how did you come upon your ideas? Like what are the inputs and influences on your vision for your character outfits? Like, should you really be concerned, or like, are you just doing a natural, organic, artistic process like a lot of other people are doing? Just something worth considering. But striking similarity is subject to law, where if the similarities are so strong, like you can't deny a coincidence. That's where I was getting into with like someone targeting an independent designer or a brand, purchasing all their stuff, reproducing essentially their products, and then trying to pass that off and commercially sell their own collection, even though it's directly derivative of what they just bought from somebody else. Like, that's where the infringement is inferred. It's complex to prove. I mean, obviously you need plenty of receipts, but I mean, having the order confirmations of these people ordering your products and then seeing them turn around and do that later, like, I can't tell me how many videos I've seen on that. It's insane. Even if the differences are like minor, and like you could claim, and that's what they do. Like, it's, again, it goes back to like intent. Like, they take these ideas, they do like maybe a slightly different color in one part, maybe a different cut in something else, because those are elements that can't be subject to copyright, and they know it, but they know very well what they did. Like, it comes down to like intent and what you know very well you were looking to do and accomplish with that whole situation. And so I have for the longest time been sleeping on the value of trend forecasting, because I'm someone who believes in personal style and in being genuinely, consistently authentic and original. Like, I've constantly received that feedback. So I'm just like, you should do what you want. Like, stay true to yourself, stay true to your vision, like, live your life. But trend forecasting can actually really give you good insight into what others are doing and what others are interested in. As I mentioned, if you do want to strategically position yourself to resonate with more of the popular culture, or just more of what people have an appetite for and are willing to invest in. But if you're an artist and you might be a little bit into fashion, but you're more so just like in the artist world and community, and just like more so focused in character design, it might be worth looking at fashion forecasters and like trends to understand maybe what to avoid in terms of boundaries, and what you could kind of like sidestep so that you're not infringing upon some sort of territory that could get you into trouble if you're overly concerned about it. So there's plenty of people obviously across all of social media doing these on a regular basis, so smart, doing deep analyses, great connecting of the dots. Like, that's worth investigating if you happen to feel like you might be running into sort of murky territory, or if you just want some inspiration. Like, either way, it's a great all-around resource. I might be checking up on more trend forecasts myself after doing this research. But it could run into a little bit of an issue if some people are using it with the wrong intent. Like, if they're just trying to clock what's in the market and just like trying to reproduce it, because the industry is so fast paced. And so there's a likelihood that some people could just like not catch just how much some people are copying others. It can get really murky really fast looking at fast fashion. And so some infamous examples, or even recent examples of copyright infringement that I just wanted to discuss to really illustrate the situation. Gucci versus Guess, because Guess and Gucci both have like the G to represent their brand, obviously. And they've done a very similar like logo print throughout some of their clothing or just some of their accessories. And so that's been a huge area of concern. Hells Angels versus Alexander McQueen, like there was just, I think, a skull logo element. So just some overlap there. Louboutin versus YSL with like the red sole shoes. YSL can have like a monochromatic red shoe and still obviously have the red sole. Like, we can't get a little too crazy over the overall color. Hermes, and the recent one is Hermes versus Meta Birkins, where it's just like literally like that NFT resembled a Birkin and was called Meta Birkins. So it kind of just leans into like that digital realm, where if you know that you're kind of doing derivative work from something that's already existed in the real world, that doesn't protect you any more than if you were to try to produce a tangible physical piece of fashion or work. There's also been other examples of like garment patterns and designs. Zara's, any sort of fast fashion brand has been infamous for this. Zara, Shein has been really subject to this. H&M versus Forever 21. I think they've had a couple examples of that. I think a couple brands versus Forever 21 because they've obviously done some mass produced stuff. And then there's also another one that I thought was crazy, Adidas versus Tom Brown, where they try to claim that Tom Brown on one of their like athletic kind of collections copied them, even though the stripes are, there are like 3 stripes, but they're not positioned nearly in the same way as Adidas. Like, it's crazy. If anyone's going to try to make an argument, they will try it. And so that's why with something so ambiguous, it really comes down to how well documented are your claims and how strong is your argument. And so I was already kind of alluding to it, like, but the best practices to avoid infringement, develop unique designs. Which is why I feel like even with regard to like my experimentations in AI, fashion concepts and like drafts, I've gotten a lot of people say like, just do Photoshop or just like do these like collages or do these different sketches, like just do this different stuff yourself, just because it really does reinforce not only just a best practice, but the spirit of kind of authenticity or uniqueness. Don't diminish that by any means. And along with that comes documenting your design process. But especially if you're an artist, like if you know very well you have all these different sketches and they look nothing like what someone else did, but your final product might look similar, like could someone really say that you were intentionally trying to copy someone else's work? You probably have, it just, all it does is reinforce your defense and your case. And then obviously understand the scope of copyright. Like that's why I wanted to lay out those different like non-copyrightable versus copyrightable things. Even with regard to public domain and royalty free, like it's just always good to read those notes to know if there's certain license limitations or certain attribution to the original source that you have to give, which is why like any sort of images off of social media or even just like search engine image like outputs, you just still got to be careful because you never really know. Obviously, permission and licensing is ideal, but also think about fair use. Like if you're doing it in a transformative way, you really need to think critically and strategically again as to where your final product or your outfits and your characters might end up. Like, is it just something a little bit more social and like just sharing and like giving commentary where you could potentially cite any sort of influences and kind of give a whole backstory as to like your design process or your vision for it? That could be a really great way just to better contextualize your intention as well as your creation. But anyway, you get it. And I really just want to emphasize how important strategy and critical thinking is within the process. And yes, art and creativity and being authentic in yourself should be a free-spirited, free-flowing kind of loose activity so that you can really let that art come to life on its own and that you don't really feel inhibited by anything. But at the same time, I think what really leads to strong innovation and transformative outcomes is when you just have a bit more structure and intentional parameters around what you're doing that just only gives stronger foundation and springboard for ideas to catapult and just cultivate something in a very specific, pointed way that could lead to a very novel and inventive breakthrough that could lead to even you having a lot more credit as someone whose signature in something completely authentic, original, and unique, unlike anything else out there. So let me know if you think this was helpful, and let me know if there's anything else fashion design and like fashion design, character design related combo that you're curious about in terms of research, because I love doing this stuff. It just feels a lot more easier, breezier, and also a lot more educational, in case you didn't know all this stuff already. But until the next video, I'll talk to you later.